Alrighty, here we go. G'day, special treat today, in person.
I know, it's been 5 years.
5 years and we're finally back face to face. What an opportunity. So yeah, we've just been hanging out for the weekend, just catching up, doing a bit of training, eating a lot of food, and we thought now's been a good time to do a podcast. So welcome back to the GST Junkies. Erdi and I today are going to talk a little bit about a topic we've titled free gains. And we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, so we might be like, oh yeah, but yesterday we said this, so if we bring that up, you'll know why. But yeah, I'll hand it over to Erdi and let him give you a bit of an update on where he is in his life right now and his adventure since last month, and then we'll sort of get stuck in.
Yeah,
What's going on, man?
Yeah, how is it that we've ended up in the same location after 5 years?
Yeah, that's it,
so,
man.
I finally made it over to Australia, as you guys have seen, and StreTch is, well, he was living a few 20 hours north of where I am right now on the east coast of Australia, but he's making his way down and I'm kind of making my way up, and we've ended up at this point in Noosa Heads, a really nice part of Queensland. And yeah, we've had the pleasure of spending the last 3 days together. Nice to meet your partner, your little baby, your dog. So that's been great because none of these existed when I knew StreTch 5 years ago. So it's all very new. And yeah, we've had some good time catching up and getting some reps in and some chats about the training and the industry, etc. Yeah, it's been good.
Hey man, it's good to catch up with you. Yeah, so I'm in the process of moving house. So we're doing a house swap. So we're going from northern Queensland down to the west coast of South Australia over to a place called Scale Bay. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be in North Queensland where Erdi's there. So we're lucky that we can cross paths on this little adventure that we're both on, and yeah, just sort of catch up. But hopefully we'll be catching up more in the future when Erdi decides he's going to move to Australia and get out of the UK.
Eventually. That's the plan. Get to us, and then we can have some more fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we wanted to talk about some free gains today, or at least the topic of free gains, and it was the concept of basically sometimes when you're training someone or you're training yourself, and you'll try a move that you haven't tried in a long time. You're like, oh, hold on a minute, this feels really easy. I haven't done this for ages, but it feels really strong. Or even like a new skill that you never knew you had, and now you can do it. Like, how is it that I'm now able to do this thing I couldn't do like 2 years ago, and I haven't even trained it? So that's kind of what we're referring to in the concept of free gains. It's like the indirect transfer of strength, flexibility, or skill, and you basically manage to achieve a new thing without having to do it. And yeah, I wanted to kind of go into a couple examples of that, maybe some of the important type of planes of strength or flexibility that you can work what we've seen to work to make that common for people. And yeah, and like again, it kind of comes down to what gives you most value for buck or most value for time when you are training things like gymnastic strength training, flexibility, or hand balancing.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like yesterday, we sort of sat down and we're trying to nut out this topic and think about it a little bit more. And like, even though Erdi and I both train handstands and flexibility and strength stuff, like we've probably got a little bit of different. Obviously, we've got a different background on how we've got to where we are, but also we've got different clientele that we seem to be working with. After years of me sort of like, I did a lot of polyquin stuff and did a lot of strength and conditioning training, and then I owned a CrossFit gym and trained a lot of CrossFit athletes and still a lot of strength and conditioning based stuff, and I've sort of come at it from that angle, in that perspective. So a lot of clients that I sort of attract are generally clients that have been doing a lot of strength and conditioning stuff, and then they want to move more into the gymnastics and flexibility stuff. Whereas Erdi was sort of saying he attracts a lot more of sort of the yogi crowd, or a lot more of the people that are generally a little bit more flexible, maybe Pilates. And then he's got to help them obviously build a lot of strength to sort of get to the skills. So we'll sort of button heads a little bit about our own experiences about this, that, the other, but we think we've sort of nutted it out. So we're going to really sort of chat a little bit about strength, flexibility and skill. And one of the things I think we spoke about is like, I think a lot of people set themselves the goal of being able to do a movement. Let's say it's a muscle up, let's say it's a handstand, a press handstand, whatever it is you're trying to chase, even if it's like a gymnastics bridge, a flexibility sort of goal. And we go after that specific thing. So let's say it's handstand and we just want to do handstand. So we're just constantly kicking up to handstand all the time, trying to get handstand. And you see this a lot. You go to the gym and someone's trying to learn handstand and they spend 20 minutes trying to kick up to handstand. And is it the best bang for their buck? And what is it that they're missing? Like, should they be training the handstand, or should they be training something else that's going to help them progress? So in your experience, man, talk to us about like your clients and what you've seen and what you think around that sort of stuff. Maybe the handstand's a good place to start.
Yeah, handstand specifically. Yeah, so you generally get two types of people. You get the ones which just kick up and do nothing but kicking up, and then you get the ones which just balance on the wall but do nothing but trying to balance on the wall because they've managed to figure out that, hey, I can hold some balance time from the wall now. And the ones who are kicking up, they get like the occasional 2-second float out of like every 1,000 reps, but they get attached to that 2-second float. I want to get that back, They just keep smashing the kick-ups. But basically, both populations are only specializing on like one segment of the handstand components when there's maybe like 3 or 4 different ones that they need to train and need to be aware of. So the people who are like constantly kicking up, they're trying to kick up into a position that they have no strength in because they haven't trained that position. So they kind of need to get on the wall. And it's like, okay, you're kicking up, and your kicking up isn't too bad. I mean, we can refine the technique here a little bit, make it a bit better, but generally speaking, you're comfortable putting your hands on the floor and trying to kick up and you have no fear. Great. But we need a template for you to kick into, because if you don't have that template, as soon as your body gets there, it's not, even if you've managed to kick into the perfect position, your body's not going to know it's the perfect position, and you're just going to fall out because you haven't trained it. So we have to get them on the wall. And then you get the opposite, and they're the people who are like always on the wall, never kicking up. So okay, great, you've built a template, you now know where to balance from, but you have no idea how to get into it. You need to train the kick-ups. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
For that, like, so let's say for that client or for that person who's kicking up all the time, so they haven't yet got their handstand and they're trying to train that skill of handstand and they're just constantly kicking up. What are they missing in your experience? What's the key thing that you feel that a lot of those people are missing?
Yeah, so they're missing the foundations of strength. Like they don't have the strength to kick into and hold a position that they're trying to kick into. So as soon as they get into the position, they'll probably usually fall out, or they're not really understanding how to balance that position. So it's usually the strength or the skill.
And then the person on the wall, so if I'm the person who spent a lot of time on the wall refining my handstand, but then I don't have the kick up, or I feel that I'm not confident in the kick up, what do you think they're missing?
Yeah, so they'll be missing the skill of the kick up. So it's usually what we're finding is there's like a deficit in either strength or skill. Flexibility can be one, but in this case, it's not usually the situation. So by getting the person, this is where the analysis is quite important. Analyzing what you're training and what needs to be done. It's like if you're trying to bake a cake and all you have is the flour, you bake it and then you come out and it's just like, you know, a bowl of flour. It's like, where's the flavour? Yeah, but you know that you're missing other ingredients. But when you're training handstands and sometimes GST, you don't know you're missing other ingredients. So yeah, what we try and do as coaches is try and find like, okay, what are the main bang for your buck ingredients? But like even if you are missing the cherry on top of the cake, you could still make a really good cake. Most people will focus on that cherry. You know, they'll just drive for the cherry, just drive for the kicking up into the handstand, but they don't have the base. There's no flour there, there's no egg, or there's no butter, whatever. No vegan cakes over here. But yeah, so that's kind of like what we're trying to get at here is what is it that people need to train. So when it comes to the handstand, what we generally find is, okay, number one, what we're supposed to try and do, they're trying to balance on the hands. Let's just go for the straight freestanding handstand. Great. Now what's important for the free, what are the most important variables here? It's being strong in that freestanding in shape. So in the straight handstand, you need to have the strength to support that position. We need to know how to enter that position, and that's where the kick up can come in handy. But if not, you can kind of do it off the wall. If you don't want to do it in the middle of the room, that's fine. And you need to know how to balance when you're in that position. They're usually the main three sort of things, assuming you have enough flexibility. So we won't talk about flexibility here, but if you have enough flexibility, you can get into the position. You need to be strong in the position you're trying to hold, and you need to know how to do the corrections, balance yourself there. So knowing that, as coaches, what we'll do is we'll have people practice those three components. We'll have them practice kick-ups, we'll have them practice chest wall holds, normally to build up the strength in the position, and we'll have them practice things like balancing off of the wall And then after you've done that for so much time and you've refined those 3 main ingredients, with the balancing you're doing like overbalance and underbalance, like heel pulls and toe pulls. Once you've refined those 3 things, you pretty much have a handstand. It can take like 6 months up to 12 months to kind of put those things into good practice and turn them into like good quality disciplined preps, and then you have your handstand. But you need to practice those things first. So sometimes what you'll do, what I've seen, just by giving someone chest to wall holds who hasn't done any chest to wall holds before but has done lots of practice in the handstand, practicing a kick up, they're like, oh wait, now when I kick up, I don't sink at the shoulders anymore. I can actually catch floats more often. And it's like, yeah, because you're getting some good free gains here because you've been neglecting this part of your training. So now by incorporating that strength aspect, now you have a foundation to place your cherry on top. You have the base of the cake. Now we can play with the cherry.
It's like the efficiency, I think. It's like the efficiency of learning the movement. We talk about the kick up, and like obviously the kick up is a skill. It's something we need to practice and we need to learn. But if you don't have the strength in the handstand, then like how efficient is the kick up going to be? You can keep practicing the kick up, as you say, like you're going to spend a lot of time kicking up, but you're really not going to get much time in the handstand. If you're always kicking up and you're always falling out, well, how much total time have you spent in that handstand? Not very long. So it doesn't matter how long, you could keep kicking up to handstand. It's still going to take you months to be able to get better at the handstand because the accumulation of that time is quite small. But the free gains, as we're sort of talking about, comes from, okay, well, if I go and spend time on the chest to wall handstand, like you say, then I'm spending a lot of time in the handstand. I'm against the wall, it's supporting me. I'm not worried too much about, let's say, the balance, but I'm just building strength in that key position, like you say. And then because I'm confident in the kick up and I've been doing that, then when the strength comes, I'm going to be able to kick up and hold a handstand for longer because I've taken the missing ingredient out of the cake or the missing ingredient out of my handstand, and I've really focused on that. And we can talk about this in any sort of gymnastics skill, I think, because our gymnastic skill requires a certain level of strength, a certain level of flexibility, but also a certain level of understanding the skill and how to do the skill. And it's like Erdi sort of talks about, it's like, well, what is the key ingredient that I'm missing? And I think, we talked about this yesterday. If I'm a strong athlete and I like to do the strength stuff, chances are I'm going to practice skill and I'm going to practice the strength stuff because that's the stuff I enjoy training and it makes me feel good. Yeah, I'm getting stronger. I can't do the handstand or I can't do the movement because I'm not strong enough. That's what we tell ourselves. So if I just get stronger, then we keep chasing that strength thing. But what about the flexibility? Is that something we're missing? And like, oh, suck at flexibility. Flexibility is boring. It's not sexy. Oh, I'm not going to do flexibility. It's not what I need to do. But then we could spend some time, a little bit of time doing flexibility. And because it's an ingredient or an element that we haven't done a lot of time working on, we can unlock these free gains, or we can start to maybe express the skill or achieve the skill faster in terms of, okay, I did flexibility stuff and I didn't worry too much about the strength stuff because I was already strong enough. Or it could be vice versa, like, Erdi sort of saying he works with a lot of, yogis. And the yogis are probably very flexible. They love flexibility training. They love stretching. So they do a lot of flexibility and then they try to practice handstands, which is the skill. But the key element or the key ingredient that they're missing is obviously the strength side of it. And maybe they suck at strength or they feel like they fail at strength. They don't feel very strong. And it's the stuff that we like to avoid. I'm not good at that, so I push it to the side just a little bit. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it, like to try and break it down in terms of unlocking skills and where can I get the best sort of progress or gains from. Let's maybe fast forward so that, if you've got the handstand and we're working towards like press handstand, what are some of the common, sort of limitations you see in the press handstand, and what do they need? What do your clients need to work on to successfully unlock that?
Yeah. So let's say you take a population of people that can already handstand but they can't press. As soon as you introduce them to the tuck handstand, I say the tuck, but I should give you the blueprint of the tuck. So what is the tuck? The tuck is basically a position where you bring your knees down towards your chest and you're also flexing at the knee. So there's hip flexion and knee flexion. Any degree of hip and knee flexion at the same time will be a tuck handstand. So even if it's like a mini tuck, only your knees are bending a little bit, hips are bending a little bit, it can still be a tuck handstand. It's just a very light one. Now, as soon as you start doing this, you bring weight into what we call underbalance. So it's like weight behind your line of handstand. So if you draw a line from your hands to your toes in a straight handstand, Any extra weight behind that line, so like towards the palms or the heels of your hands, is what we call underbalance. And any weight over that line, so let's say from your fingertips forwards, is overbalance. Now, if you can get used to holding weight in underbalance, so that's where the tuck comes in, if you start to bring your legs down, now what we're doing is we're building strength in your shoulder flexion. A little bit of weight will have a higher demand in the shoulder flexion, so that if your shoulders actually keep you up, not collapse. As soon as your shoulders start collapsing, we're now using different muscles. So if we can stop your shoulders collapsing, we're using the traps to basically hold you upright. So what we see, if you take this population of people that can handstand, you take half of them and just let them play towards the press, and you take another half of them and actually build them strength in things like their tucks, their straddles, and their pikes. Those who start building strength in underbalance will get to the press handstand much quicker than anyone else. So the tuck can basically be the bigger value movement for the handstand development. It's like if you want to train lower body, you know you're going to need to train some variation of squat. Okay, even if you're not going to barbell squat, maybe you're going to leg press, but you're going to be training that pattern of squat. The squat for the lower body is basically what the tuck handstand is for the handstand. You get that handstand strong. It's quite ironic actually, because the tuck itself it's an inverted squat. So as soon as you bring your knees down, you're coming into it like an inverted squat. So it's quite interesting. The tuck is the squat for the handstand. As soon as you get that tuck strong, your handstand goes through the roof, and that's kind of what happened with myself, with lots of students. Your traps start to get stronger, your active shoulder flexion gets stronger, your awareness of how to shift weight in your hands improves. Basically, you're getting a lot of value from just like one drill. So the handstand is something that one is pursuing. As soon as the earlier you can start working and developing that tuck, the better. That's when you start basically putting weight on the bar. Now you're putting weight on the bar, you're making some gains. So yeah, I've seen people go from pretty much like no press to getting like somewhat of a press just by improving the depth of that tuck handstand and getting their knees closer to their chest, and all of a sudden they start unlocking the strength in the lower segments of the press to handstand.
That just proves the point. Like, it's interesting hearing you talk about that, and like, you know, your clientele is probably more of the people that are flexible and not strong, and it makes pure sense. Like that if you build strength in that tuck position, in that overbalance, it's gonna give them the missing ingredient that they need to be able to get there. Whereas like some of the clients that I train, like, and even my own experience with maybe sort of my first press to handstand, is I've got a lot of strength. My shoulders were strong, and I could muscle my way through it, or my clients can sort of muscle their way through it, but it's not pretty, and they're going the hard path because they lack the flexibility, let's say, in the pancake or in that core compression. They've got tight hamstrings. So their ability to close that straddle or that press is hard. So they have to lean the shoulders a long way forward. They load the shoulders a lot, but they've got quite strong shoulders, so it sort of holds them, and then they can sort of do this sort of messy press. Maybe it's bent knees, but it's just like the feet are a long way away from their center of mass, and it's the strength that carries them through.
Yeah.
But in my case, it was like, well, if I want to get better at the press, I want to be able to do multiple reps of the press, or I want to be able to work towards, let's say, stalwart press. I don't feel it was a lot of strength that I was missing. Like it was, there's still more strength I can definitely gain that's going to help me to improve my press. But in reality, the free gains or the quicker gains could potentially come by me actually starting to work on my pancake or starting to work more on my flexibility.
Yeah. So I had a guy like you as well, who was very strong. He pretty much had like a close to a straddle planche, but not quite there. He was like closed hip straddle planche when he learnt his press, and it wasn't the nicest press, but he could fucking press.
Yeah,
he'd get up. So by making improvements in his pancake afterwards and making improvements in his hip compression and active hip compression, the press got a lot nicer, and then he could do more reps with it. But he had like a very good base of strength, and he could tuck. Like, we built him to a good tuck, and just with that alone he was able to press. And I guess kind of like your first press, because like now your straddle is a lot nicer, and you've got good access to your like locked knees and straight legs in your straddle and handstand and your pancake. So when you press now, it looks, I guess, a lot nicer than what you were doing originally. but that base layer of strength definitely helps you unlock that first rep.
Yes. Yeah. The strength will give me the skill, and I can muscle my way through the skill.
Yeah.
But then I was telling Erdi yesterday, I used to go to this handstand class in London. The guy called Senna, and he ran it in this church. It was amazing. So you go to this old church, and they don't use it as a church anymore, but it's just this floor, and it's got all the stained glass windows, and he just teaches handstands in this epic church. And there was like, there's girls there that are just doing, stall to press, and they're doing one-arm handstands, and they're doing, multiple reps of press handstand, and they just look frail, and they just look weak, and it was like, how can they just do that? And like, I'm so much stronger than them. Like, there's no way they can deadlift, or they can press, or they can do weighted chin-ups like I can, but yet they're busting out multiple reps of press handstand, but they're not missing the strength. They've got the strength they need because of the flexibility. Their flexibility actually makes a lot of these movements easier. The flexibility and skill allows them to unlock that. Yes, they are strong, and they've got the strength to carry their body weight. But the thing that I was missing and not seeing maybe at that time was like, okay, my flexibility is terrible. My strength is exponentially higher than them maybe, but I can't do what they're doing because I just lack the position. And the position can just change everything dramatically. I could continue building strength. I could continue improving my weighted chin up. I could continue improving my deadlift. I could continue improving all this stuff that I was doing at the time, but it was not going to be the thing that unlocked the press handstand for me.
Yeah, I mean, you need specific strength.
Yes, that's right.
The skill specific for whatever position you're in.
Yeah.
So for these girls, they would have been in very open shoulder positions, and their hips would have already been
stacked
above their shoulders. So all they needed was just enough strength to kind of keep that level of elevation while the legs moved around the body.
Yeah.
Whereas with most normal people, the shoulders can't start stacked. And even now, like, your shoulders won't start stacked.
No.
They start in a plunge. Maybe not massively, but like a little bit. So now the muscles that are responsible are a little bit different. So yeah, these girls might not even be able to do a piked push-up. I'm not too sure. You'd have to test them and see where it's at. But they can press because they have the skill-specific strength in that position.
Yeah, and the store to press and all the things that they could do. So, and like, I had that same mindset, like younger days of being a personal trainer and coming from like a polypin, sort of education. It was just like, make people fucking strong. Like, if people are strong and just keep making them stronger, then they're going to be able to achieve a lot more. So it was all about this idea of chasing the weight on the bar and just getting stronger, keep focusing on the strength. But we talked about this the other day, and we were talking a bit about, you talked about an experience where you struggled with front lever, and like by doing more weighted chins and building your strength in the weighted chin up, it's got some carryover to that front lever. But we sort of touched on this idea of, well, what is the weight that you need to be able to chin up to successfully do a front lever? So if we took a whole heap of, like, an audience that could do a front lever, these people have all got their front lever, and then we tested, like, their chin up. What's their 1RM chin up? Like, what would be the minimum amount of weight that you could chin up and have the front lever? Would be
as
an
a
interesting
ratio to the body weight.
As a ratio to the body weight, obviously, would be an interesting thing to figure out. Obviously, there's a lot of work to go behind that. And obviously, you could be stronger than that. So let's say you needed to be able to chin up 1.5 times or 1.4 times your body weight to be able to do a front lever. It's like, okay, so if I don't have that strength, then I've got to build to that minimum level of strength to be able to do a front lever. Is there any point in me continuing, what do you think? Is there any point in me continuing to train weighted chin-ups then, if I've got that minimum strength?
The minimum strength? So we have minimum strength, and then we have like strength in reserve as well. So it's like, because you can have the absolute minimum for something and you can just about do it, kind of like a sketchy muscle up. If someone just unlocks their first muscle up, and they've done the technique for a while, they've had the base amount of strength, they can do one, but they can't do any more. Right? And I would kind of consider it that way. So it's like, if you have just the minimum, it's like, cool, you've got that in the bag, but if you get a little bit more than that minimum, you're going to need a little bit less of the other things. And if it's already an area that you're training and you're kind of proficient at training that and proficient at progressively overloading that, it's always good to have a little bit extra strength in reserve, because then as well, if you did have to stop training it, it wouldn't drop below the minimum, if that makes sense. So I never like to try and like just get the bare. I want the bare plus a bit extra. And this is kind of where I see a lot of extra reps come in When someone unlocks a new skill and they're like, oh wait, I can do it for more than one rep. I can do more. Yeah, it's because you have extra strength in reserve. But if you only had the bare minimum, you'd get that one rep, and then you'd only have it once a week, or once every month. Sometimes you'll see this with press handstand. You see someone unlock the press. Oh yeah, I got my first press, and you don't hear from them on Instagram for a whole 6 months because they got attached to that one press. They got it on a lucky day, but they didn't have enough strength in reserve to basically be able to do that press 5 times in a session, or 6 times in a session, or per week even. So yeah, I like to give I like to make them train a little bit over that minimum, but then the focus will need to change after, once you have that base strength and you have a bit more, you have to change the focus. Because if you don't change the focus, you'll get attached to only getting stronger. And this is when the focus will change, okay, what else is missing? And this is where the engineering comes into it. It's is it strength? Is it skill? Is it flexibility? We know the strength's good because you've hit your bare minimum. But let's say for a one-arm chin-up, generally speaking, I think the numbers have been done, but if you can do a weighted chin-up for more than half your body weight for 2 to 3 reps, you generally have roughly enough strength. I think the bigger, the taller the person, the bigger the person, the more they kind of need that. The smaller, the less from experience. But you probably don't need to keep training the weighted chin-up. No, you can probably get away with training your one-arm chin-up eccentrics. Let's learn the skill. How do we move the scapula? How do we get the scapula to wrap and unwrap around the rib cage as you're going through the motion? Because the strength of your lats and your biceps will be enough to support that, and your ligaments and tendons. Yes, or do you need flexibility? For the one-arm chin-up, probably don't need flexibility. It's very unlikely. But there are other GST skills where, the press handstand we were talking about, where you will need flexibility. Maybe even the muscle up. You might be missing, flexibility in the shoulder extension. So you're trying to transition to your dip, but you've never dipped to full range. You've only dipped to partial range. No, we need to fix your flexibility in the shoulder extension.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there is maybe a bare minimum level of strength we need for specific skills, whether we know that or we don't know that. But if you build above that, a little bit above that, then you've got that strength in reserve that Erdi was talking about, which is awesome. But then if you keep training strength and you keep putting all of your eggs in that basket, keep doing more strength work because that's what you love to do, it might not be the fastest way to unlock the skill that you're trying to achieve. If it is the muscle up, let's say, which we hear a lot of calisthenics and a lot of gymnastics guys or bodyweight training guys talk about, okay, if you've got 5 ring dips and you've got 5 chest to bar chin ups, then you've got the strength that you need to do the muscle up. And okay, that's a good strength measurement. So then what's missing? Do you need to get stronger? Or is there another key element, like Erdi was saying? Do you have the shoulder extension? Can you get into a deep dip? Is that the key component now that's missing? Is it the skill of the transition and doing eccentric transitions and understanding and building that skill of transition? Is it false grip strength? Okay, you can do dips and you can do chin-ups, but what about that false grip strength? And can you hold the false grip, understand the false grip, and use that false grip to your advantage? And having that sort of overview of, breaking a movement down. What does that movement require? We were talking about this the other day. I've got with the skin the cat, let's say, I've got a few clients that are working towards the skin the cat goal, and one girl that's just super flexible. She's, she can do chest to thighs, nose to shin, pike, but she struggles with the strength in the skin the cat. She doesn't have the straight arm strength to pull through the skin the cat. Another guy who came to me, ex-rugby player, and he's quite strong. He's got the strength, but when I first started training with him, he couldn't hold a hanging L-sit. He couldn't even hold a hanging single leg straight L-sit. He was lacking the core strength here, but also just the flexibility. His hamstrings were so tight. And for him, it was working on releasing those hamstrings, improving his pike and his flexibility. And now that he's done that and he can hold this double leg straight hanging L-sit, he's got the ability and the strength to be able to pull himself backwards and forwards through the skin the cat because we targeted the missing element. Or maybe it's this area of free gains that we're talking about. The ingredient that he was missing the most of was what we sort of had to hit to get him to work through, that skin the cat component. And the same for, the girl that I'm training now. It's the strength component that she's missing. She's got the flexibility, so we've just got to continue to hit the strength with more of her training dedicated to strength, less of her training dedicated to flexibility, so that she can quickly get the free gains to be able to unlock the skin the cat. What other movements, what other things do you see, or what would you like to add about this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I was gonna use the example you were talking about yesterday with your muscle up. So you were training with Derek Woodsky, who was predominantly a weightlifter for a while before you did the bodyweight trainer, and he had you doing heavy work. And you told me once you finished training with Derek Woodsky, you started learning bodyweight training. You took some time to learn the technique for the muscle up on the rings, but once you had it, was it 5 reps?
Yeah, the reps just came, or the reps just grew quickly.
Yeah, so like you didn't have to like build the 1 rep and then from 1 rep build to 2 and then from 2 to build to 3. You kind of like you all you had to do is build the technique, and then you had the muscle up accessible. So what sort of things were you training with Derek which kind of gave you that transferable strength to the muscle up?
Yeah, like I said, it was very much a dedicated strength program. It was all about just get fucking strong. So, I think, pressing's always been one of my big weaknesses. So a lot of my focus, even within the strength program that we can look at, it was I lacked the pressing strength. So with Derek, I spent a lot of time doing bench press. I spent a lot of time doing dips and weighted dips. I spent a lot of time doing overhead press. Like a big part of my workout was more pressing, because I was naturally stronger in pulling movements. Like, my 1RM deadlifts was like 210 kilos at a weight of like 78 kilo body weight, but my maximum squat was like 130 kilos. And in reality, that comparison is a long way out. Yeah. At one point I did chin-ups. At one point I did chin-ups. I think I did 40 kilos for 5 reps of a chin-up at one point when I was training with Derek.
It's very big.
But my bench press was lucky to be 85 kilos for one. And I always struggled with pressing. But there was a lot of work done on the pressing. Like when I first started pressing, I had minimal pressing strength. So for me to bench press 85 kilos, like that was a huge amount of progress that I made in a short period of time in terms of the growth of my pressing movements. But yeah, that all that strength training, we were doing weighted chins, we were doing weighted pull-ups, we were doing a lot of weighted rows, and we were doing all the weighted press movements. So I had the strength to do the muscle up. Like I could easily do, pulls to the chest, but I just never had the transition. I'd never worked on the transition. And then like in CrossFit, obviously when you first start doing that, it's all about the kipping and using the momentum. But to unlock the strict chin up, it was like, well, what am I missing? What's the key thing that I was missing? And it wasn't strength. I didn't need more strength to do the muscle up. That's right.
But having the strength in the chin ups, I guess the weighted chin ups, and having the strength in your weighted dips and your other pressing movements, did allow you to do it for reps once you had the transition unlocked.
I think the first time I did a strict muscle up, like it was just like I did one, and then it was like, hey, let me do another one. I did one, and it was like, yeah, okay, cool, I've got the strict, and then it's like, okay, let's see how many you can do, and like I could do 3, and it's just like in the next set I could do 3, and then from there it was, sort of went from 3 to 5 to 8 or something like that, and then I was doing like, okay, a workout was 20 reps of strict muscle up sort of thing, and it was like, okay, how many minimum number of sets I can do to do 20 muscle ups. Your accumulation sort of thing. So yeah, for me it was like, maybe doing 8, maybe doing 7, maybe doing 5, or whatever it was to get me to those reps, and just trying to improve that endurance.
So from that, based on that, I would say weighted chin-ups, things like weighted chin-ups and weighted dips have good basically provide almost free gains for a muscle up. Like maybe you can't do it yet because you just don't have the conditioning on the wrist for the skin. I always find the skin to be a big limitation for the false grip and the muscle up. As soon as you've kind of got over that and you're no longer worried about the pain it kind of causes on the pinching on the skin, and you've got the conditioning of the actual transition, okay, now I can muscle up. Like it was quite a big revelation, because like some people, you get the chasing the muscle up and then they finally get the first one, but it's such a big 1RM for their strength reserves that they can't do any more. And it's like they can only do it on a good fresh PR sort of day, as opposed to being able to train it regularly. So yeah, I think that's like the main point I was trying to get across, is like trying to have a bit of extra strength for the movement, the specific movement or the position that you're working in, and then the rest kind of comes a little bit easier generally. But obviously it depends on the skill, right? If it's like a very flexibility dominant skill, you can probably keep getting stronger, but it doesn't really matter how much strength you have at this point. It's not going to help. But like I've seen guys do muscle ups with no muscle up practice, and they've just gone, oh, what are you doing? Are you doing a muscle up? Let me try it. And they just hold the rings and they just shoot up, and they're up and over the rings. Like, it wasn't too bad, and they do like a few reps. I'm like, wow, okay, like 3 gains. Because they've got strength in certain areas. But there's some skills where you can't really do that. Like,
that story reminds me, actually, sorry to interrupt, just as you go that, there was a time back when we had the gym at Momentum and we were training some of the British athletes. We had the sprinting team, so we had a few of their 100, 200 metre sprinters that were coming in and doing strength training with us. And these guys are just like, they're normal human beings, but they're just next level. Like the way they progress is just insane. So like you would teach them to clean, and then all of a sudden they'd be cleaning 110 kilos. Like you'd be like, how? Like, but they're just naturally gifted in that sort of sense. But anyway, one time they brought in one of the decathlete that do the multiple sports, and he came in and he was just mucking around and he was doing a bit of strength stuff with us, and there was like looking at the high pull-up bars and stuff. He said, and it's like, oh, what do you do with all those up there? And we're like, oh, we do bar muscle ups. So you sort of pull yourself up and you get above the bar and you do a dip. And he's like, oh, what, like this? And he just like starts pumping out bar muscle ups. I'm like, have you done that before? He goes, no, I've never done that before. I'm like, but like he's just naturally gifted and just naturally strong. Like he had an incredible squat. He had a strong chin up. He was just super explosive. Like
very explosive, very fast twitch.
Yeah, insane.
Well, maybe that's what we're missing. Maybe the secret to free gains is doing sprints. Maybe that's what we need to do.
Yeah, there's a lot in that for sure.
But you'll meet a lot of people like that. Well, you won't meet a lot, but you'll meet a lot over your career, right? Because you just end up attracting like fast, powerful people. I remember just like not even athletes, just like random weird like nerdy guys. That's probably not the best way of putting it. I'm trying to like paint a picture here. Basically people who don't go to the gym, people who don't really strength train, but quite light. This guy, it was a friend. We were in a friend group, but there's been loads of cases like this, and he would just be able to like almost press up into a handstand from like a bent arm, like piked push-up position. I'm thinking, how is this person strong enough to just push up? And some people are just wired in a very specific way. I don't know if it's like because I'm starting to see some patterns in terms of like differences in push and strength. Like some people just have this weird front delt strength where they're just able to push up and into like a handstand push-up, or they'll just make fast gains in like overhead pressing, and others who are very slow there but might make sort of faster gains on like their chest type pressing. I don't know if you've noticed any differences like this with some of the athletes you've trained, but I definitely see a difference in some cases where some people are just stronger horizontally and some just stronger overhead vertically. But and it's just very interesting that these people, they're just wired in this way of strength. And I'm like, I've been training piked push-ups for years, and at that point I couldn't push up into a handstand. And this kid who's like, I don't know, he just sits at an office, does some work, like generally I think he does some bouldering. He stays fit, active. So he's not like a super sedentary, high body fat type person, but it's like kind of skinny, does a little bit of bouldering, doesn't do any really pushing exercises, but could just like push up. I was like, that's amazing. I don't know how you do it, but fair enough. So it would have been good to like do some more tests actually and be like, all right, what's like what type of base layer of strength has this person got? And maybe not even why, but what can they do with like an overhead press? And then how does that transfer over? It's very frustrating when you meet these people, but because you're trying for ages, and they can just do it.
I've got one more story on strength, and then I think we should this is Sky, by the way. It's my little border collie. She's come for some attention.
She's been a big treat.
One more story on strength that I think a lot of people might relate to, but then I think maybe we could talk a little bit about flexibility. And I think the flexibility conversation will be quite interesting. But I was chatting to you yesterday about it and sort of saying I had this client. I trained her for a very long time, and she was strong. And let's say her 1RM deadlift was like 85 kilos. So and when I said it was her 1RM, she could pull it for 3 or 4 repetitions. But if I put 87.5 kilos on the deadlift bar, she couldn't get it off the floor. And we stuck at it for a long period of time, like multiple phases, trying to get her stronger to be able to deadlift more than this 85 kilos. The thing is, like, if she could pick up a weight, she could move that weight. Like, she was just really good at maybe sort of endurance and maybe sort of slow twitch fibers, but her ability to dig deeper into recruiting more muscle fibers, more motor units, and to build that strength was lacking. And it was really hard for her to make progresses in strength, but as soon as she could lift that weight, she could just do it for multiple repetitions. So it's just interesting to sort of think about that strength. And I think, Erdi, with a lot of his, flexible clients who come to him, let's say yogis who are coming to him with great flexibility, they don't have the ability to dive into deeper levels of strength or recruit more muscle fibers. They're great at doing, all of the yoga stuff. They've got great body awareness and understanding of where their body is in space and coordination and balance and all these things that they get from yoga. But they don't recruit more muscle fibers, or they can't activate these motor units to dig deeper into a deeper level of strength that allows them to do more advanced body weight movements, or even to do weighted chin-ups or overhead press or the strength movements. So I think there would be a lot of people out there that might relate to that story, or have this base level of strength. They can do something, they can do a lot of it, but just getting that first rep, or getting that first, unlocking that a level of strength is something that's a slow progression. But that's where the free gains, as we're talking about, sort of come from. If they spend more time focusing on building that strength, then it's going to have a huge carryover to everything else that they're doing.
I'm now thinking sprints would be good for them as well.
Huge.
To build that fast twitch acceleration, and just the change in like the way the nervous system recruits their muscle fibers. Because I imagine it will be one of those things where they just won't be able to access their 100% speed on their sprint, and then they're trying to run. This is as fast as I can run. But then one day it will just like click, and they're like, oh wow, I've taken off a couple of seconds from my 100-meter sprint, and just by having this switch in the nervous system. I might have to try that now.
Derek used to get us to do sprints, so we would do 2 sessions a day with Derek, but the second session was more like a recovery base. So our first session of the day would be like, it's an hour and it's strength training or whatever, and maybe it was heavy squats and it was leg stuff. And then in the afternoon he might give us like this 15-minute sprint session, but all it was he preferred if he could find a hill, and he would say, I want you to do 15 times 10-meter sprints.
Okay.
And it's just about acceleration. So you're going from a dead stop to trying to accelerate as hard as you can over that 15 or 10 meters that he's got you to do. But it's about going from nothing to full power. Like, how quickly can I switch on and accelerate? And it's not a session that's designed to make you feel puffed out. It's not a session designed to make you, be in a puddle of sweat on the floor. It's actually a session required to you to get that central nervous system working, and to think about activating and creating maximum force in a very short period of time, which obviously carries over to Olympic lifting, and can carry over to, your relative strength and your absolute strength sort of gains that you're trying to work towards. So yeah.
I think I'm going to run a bit of experimentation with the sprints and see if I can unlock some new free gains from that. See if I can sprint my way to the shoulder press. I think we might be onto something.
This is hand sprints, mate.
Yeah, but a 15 by 10 is quite interesting, because it's almost like a powerlifting rep scheme, isn't it? In terms of like high sets, short reps. Because like 10 seconds would be the equivalent of, what was it, in overcoming gravity? I think it was like 1 rep was 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Is their translation of like the ATP energy system. So it'd be that, or to be fair, 15 by 10 seconds would almost be like 15 sets of 5 seconds. For
it's
5
not 10
reps.
seconds, we're after 15 meters, so it might take me less than 2 seconds to run 15 meters.
Oh, it's not 10 seconds.
No, it's like 15 or 10 meters. I'm just doing a short sprint over a distance.
Okay. I think you might have said 10 seconds.
Oh, did I? Okay, yes. No, sorry, it's just
makes...
distance. So it's like, okay, I'm going to do 15 sprints of 10 meter sprints. And when you think about 10 meters, it's really not that far.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, even if the idea of the incline is it just allows you to put in more force because you're running up a hill. Yeah. So you're generating more force there.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we're looking at energy systems, we could go down that path. Anything sort of sub 10 seconds is very much, an anaerobic. It's not using oxygen to produce that energy. It's the local stores of glucose in the muscle that we're actually hitting there in that sense. And then we could even talk about like less than 5 seconds, 7 to 5 seconds is more creatine phosphate in the actual muscle. So yeah, we're looking at the energy systems there, but which is what those explosive athletes are using when we're thinking of lifting and stuff like that.
15 by 10 meters. If that was a 2 second set, it's basically 15 sets of 1 rep. So, yeah, which is very similar to like normal like heavy strength training and powerlifting.
Yeah.
But it's almost skill training for the nervous system, isn't it? Which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I might try it with some sprints and see if we can get some gains there.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, that's a interesting stories with the sprinters, and then you got the opposite stories with the complete slow twitch fiber people who struggle to increase the reps or in any weight.
I think strength is an easy topic to talk about because
flexibility.
it's so easy for us to measure strength. Like we get obsessed with strength because we get obsessed with the numbers, and it's like, okay, what can I chin up? What can I overhead press? What can I do? And we can easily see progress because small increments can. Okay, I've got a new PB. But let's talk a little bit about flexibility, because it was something that I ignored for a long time through my career as a personal trainer, but even through my career as a hobbyist who wants to train and do all this sort of stuff. I just kept putting it off. And I think, it's hard sometimes to see the progress in flexibility. Like strength progress can be slow. Like when you first start strength training, you make big gains and then it really slows down. And in flexibility, I sometimes feel like even the progress can be just slow. But it's something it's hard to measure. Like how am I measuring my flexibility improvements? It's not like a number. It's a hard number to put a thing on. It
has a lot of variables basically that you can measure, and they're just not as sexy as the variables in strength training. Like in strength training, you can measure the weight going up, but you can also measure the reps going up. Right? But it's similar with flexibility. It's like you can measure the depth, or you can measure the time that you can hold a certain depth. And then you build that time before you go deeper. It's kind of like that progressive overload window as well. But yes, in general, the variables are a lot more misunderstood, so it's a lot harder to measure that progress. And some of the variables are different. So like sensation is one, like the feeling in flexibility is like if you're in a stretch and over time that stretch changes to a different location, you're probably making progress, but you don't realize it. You're like, oh, but I still don't have the front split. No, not yet. But you've only just peeled that first layer of the onion, as Emmett would say. Well, now we're peeling something a little bit deeper. We're going to the next layer and that next layer, and then all of a sudden you will get a drop. So yeah, agreed. It's very hard to measure the progress of flexibility.
And we talked about, okay, let's say we're working towards a strength goal. We're working towards a front lever, and maybe there's a specific number in terms of like, how much can I pull up or how much can I chin up before I have the strength to be able to do my first front lever or hold front lever. In your experience, like when some stuff you've worked on with clients, is there a certain level of flexibility that you see or you aim for before you get a client to work on a particular skill or before they can unlock a particular skill?
The only time I have that is for handstands, and it's like I want them to be able to get, so let's say assuming full open shoulder position is like 180 degrees, I would kind of want them to be hitting at least 170 before they're like trying to balance, because otherwise they end up just planche balancing the whole way, and it kind of just sets quite big bad habits. But about when you're roughly around the 170 degree, like give or take 5 degrees, you can still create a line for most people where they're using the traps, even if they're not fully open onto the 180 path. That's the only time where I'm like, okay, I need that kind of flexibility for a skill. Otherwise, yesterday we spoke about the press handstand, didn't we? And basically what I did is I took all of my students who learned to press the handstand, and I measured their degrees of hip flexion in a straddle. So let's say you're in a seated straddle on the floor, put your hands on the floor in between your knees. How far up can you lift the legs off the floor? So these are kind of strength as well as flexibility, because you're looking at the strength of the hip flexors, but also their accessible range. And what I found was they could lift their legs to about 40 degrees. What I found was all of them who learnt the press at the time they learnt the press could lift their legs to about 40 degrees off the floor. Apart from one who couldn't, but he was also the strongest in the planche, which is quite interesting. And this is where it's like, okay, what type of person do I have? What type of physique or phenotype do I have? If I have the really strong plancher, maybe I don't need the 40 degrees of hip flexion from the straddle, but by chasing that, it'll definitely make it a lot easier for him. But if I do just have someone who isn't very strong in planche, then I'm looking for at least 40 degrees sort of off the floor in a seated straddle. So that's like another example, I guess, of where I would want some specific flexibility requirements. And then I guess we spoke earlier about the dip, didn't we, in the shoulder extension. I think that one's good just for injury prevention as well. Just like keeping the shoulders healthy. Like if you can't comfortably extend your shoulder with a bent elbow to can't get the elbow above shoulder height, then you're putting yourself up for failure almost. You want to kind of fix that. But yeah, I don't have too many like flexibility requirements in terms of it. You have to be able to do this for this skill.
But then the question is, like, and it's interesting, that guy who's stronger, the guy that you talk about who's got his press, but he's also got his planche, and he doesn't have that degree of hip strength or hip range. If his goal was to, okay, I want to be able to do 5 press to handstand, what would you work on with him?
Now we want to make it a bit more efficient. and that's when you would just smash the flexibility, because chances are he's got more than enough strength to hit those 3 to 5 reps, but he will burn out pretty quick on the delts if he doesn't get the hips moving properly. So we improve that flexibility, and we will get that person to the reps that they need.
Yeah. Whereas the others that have got that 40 degrees of hip flexion and they can do their press handstand, like what's probably more common for them if they say, okay, I want to be able to do 5 press handstand, what would be your main focus in programming with those guys, do you think?
Can they do, if they could do one?
If they can do one and they've got this 40 degrees that you've measured.
If they can do one, then I need that one to increase on reps, so I need more trap strength for these people, and we would have them basically accumulate in that press to handstand. So kind of like you do with your muscle ups, where you get yourself 20 minutes to 30 minutes and you're doing 1 rep at a time. Then we try and increase that number. So generally once somebody can do, from my experience, anywhere between like 15 to 20 reps in like a 20 to 30 minute time range, then they can usually go to the next level. They can progress to 2 reps, something like that. That's why I would kind of go down. So basically, accumulating tension on the traps, and in that position, I would just get them stronger. Yeah. It's just come to me now. Like I've got a couple of clients, and I'm interested to hear your opinion on it. Like I've got a couple of clients that are working towards the press to handstand, and we're doing like feet elevated press handstand. So they can come off a box and they've got their feet elevated and they're pressing the handstand. And then there are times where I'm just working the eccentric press handstand. So they'll kick up to handstand, they'll open and they lower down, and they're trying to control that eccentric. Interested to hear, so they're controlling that eccentric and they get to a point and they just lose it. Like gravity takes over. Okay. They are quite strong. Like generally the shoulder strength is fine. Like these guys are strong that I'm thinking of. In your mind, what is the missing element there? Where would the best free gains come from if that's sort of happening? So they're strong, but they're not strong at the low pressing range. So this is where you kind of need to test them just to make sure. Have them like put their hands on the floor in a standing pike position, and then can they lift the toes off the floor? Can they do like a press walk? That makes sense? No. So basically what they're doing, they're quite strong at the top. If we're looking at their hips, are their hips going past 90 degrees? So if they can get more than 90 degrees hip flexion, because some people they'll get to like the straddle handstand and then they'll just like drop to the floor, or some people they'll start to fold at the hips but then they'll drop quite quick at the bottom. So we kind of need to have a look at that. If they can get the hips past the 90 degrees of hip flexion, and then it looks like their legs are starting to come towards their body, now they need low pressing strength. And the biggest bang for buck exercises here are things like, it sounds not as relevant, but they are, is things like the L-sit to tuck planche. So L-sit tuck planche or tuck planche slides, basically the tuck planche strength at the bottom. So it's the strength at the bottom and like trying to push from like a protracted position up into like an elevated scapular position. So that's generally where I find the biggest bang for buck for these people. And if that's not their problem, and their hips get stuck at 90 degrees of flexion, and they basically end up just like dropping. They end up planching. So I like what you're saying. So but he gets his hips, let's say, to 90 degrees, and then when the legs want to come lower, the shoulder angle starts to close. So this is hip flexion. So this is where they're missing hip flexion. So now, what we need to get them to do is learn how to flex their hips beyond 90 degrees. There's a couple of really good ways of doing it, and you'd have to. Obviously you got the pancake, like you want to get them proficient at the pancake, but some people, they can pancake or get close to the pancake but still not actively flex beyond 90 degrees. So you have them lying on their back, legs up against the wall. Can you actively pull your legs off of the wall? If you can, right, now we're building. They're in a straddle position on the wall. Straddle position on the wall. So now what we're doing is we're teaching the body how to pull the legs from the 90 degree angle to walk closer to the body, and we're almost inverted. We're not quite, we're supine, but if you can do that for reps, then generally you can start to transfer it over to the press handstand. So that would be the flexibility component, and then the skill component. What I would give them, so if they just keep dropping in eccentric, I would take them off freestanding eccentrics, and I'd have them doing back to wall eccentrics. Because like you said, maybe they're not missing the strength. back to wall variation doesn't train the strength, but it teaches you how to apply your current ranges of flexibility to the press to handstand without worrying about the balance.
Yeah, I love that answer, and it was great because like I think your natural mind works with the clientele that you work with. So when I didn't give him enough detail when I explained what this client was struggling with, but your natural thing was to go towards this lack of strength and building that strength, to be able to control that. But then when I gave you the idea that he was leaning forward in the planche sort of stuff, then it's okay, well now he's missing the flexibility of the pancake or the awareness of how to close the hip angle. But you can sort of see that like depending on the client and what their strengths are, whether it's they're strong at flexibility or they're strong at strength, then and we can sort of see how they move, then it's like, well, what's the missing element? And Erdi's got a list of exercises that he can give to different clients that are missing different ingredients, as we circle back to the cake idea or that analogy that you used at the start, that are going to help them progress with that. And like you say, we could keep training this eccentric handstand press, but it's really a waste of time. Like it is. Eventually he might get it, but it would be better spending that time, instead of doing sets of eccentric handstand press up, it would be better spending that time working on building the understanding of hip flexion, working on his pancake, and potentially working on the back to wall press handstand to be able to control that movement, limit the planching going forward, and start to build that awareness and skill. So I think it's a great answer because it's all these variables that we've got with so many different people. Yes, it's the press handstand they're trying to unlock, but you can sort of see we can't just go, okay, here's the 3 best exercises for press handstand. You could just do these 3 exercises for press handstand like we see on Instagram all the time. Well, it's like, well, no, are you too strong or are you strong enough? Yeah. Are you flexible enough? Are you aware of the skill or the small details of the press handstand, which is the key little thing that you need to unlock that's going to help you get that whole sort of movement. And I really like that answer. I think the press handstand's a great example of that because it requires so many different elements.
It's just quite complicated as a skill. And most of the skills that we sort of learn in GST in terms of like the strength type of skills is it's mostly it's either skill or strength. There's not much of a flexibility component. But the handstand, the first handstand has like all 3, and they're all 3 are really valid. Yeah,
100%. Awesome. I think we wanted to sort of finish off and talk about stuff outside of training as well. So we've got this idea of like in training, flexibility, strength and skill, and what's the element you're missing or the ingredient you're missing, and how can you spend more time on that or work on that to get the free gains, progress a lot faster. But what about lifestyle factors? What are you seeing with a lot of your clients outside of the gym or outside of training that is maybe impacting their progress?
Oh, I've seen people who would take a holiday, come back from their holiday and smash PBs all around the board. And it's like, okay, your life is too stressful. Depending on what's happened on this holiday. But generally speaking, you live too much of a stressful life. You need that more downtime and you will make more progress. You spend too much time in your sympathetic nervous system, not enough in parasympathetic. I think that's right.
Yes, correct.
So your body is never performing to its like optimal level because it can't. Otherwise, it would die. It would break down. So it constantly puts you at a level of underperformance as a way to protect you. But as soon as you get some downtime and you're now fully rested, it gives you a bit more access to a little bit more of your muscle units and muscle fibers, etc., and you can put in a bit more power. So I mean that's one example. I had another fun example of this woman who went to her home country, which involved having a lot. So she lived in the UK and she was doing night shifts. So this person would sleep in the day and she'd be awake at night under artificial lights in a hospital. And this was her life, like 6 days a week. And she went away to Ghana, came back, and she was again like top shape. Her sessions were just amazing. I was like, this is a different person. She didn't train while she's in Ghana. She was away for like almost a month. She didn't train in that month. She came back, she was smashing her sessions. It's like, vitamin D probably, or just better sleep, one or the other. So that was quite interesting. So basically this is a good interesting areas where I've seen people just make progress and then find ways to incorporate, because sometimes you don't realize that you're not getting enough sun or you're not getting enough downtime until you have it, and then come back and then notice improvements, and you're like, oh shit, okay, so I should do something about my life. So then as soon as you find ways to incorporate those changes into their life, they they basically have a much better time with their training.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's like the fatigue masks fitness.
Yeah.
If you're constantly fatigued, you're never performing at your optimal level. And there might be times in your training where you are pushing it and you are, working in a fatigue state and you are trying to apply a certain amount of stress so the body adapts. But there needs to be times in the training where you are backing off a little bit and you're actually allowing your body to recover beyond that fatigue, so then you can express your full potential, your full levels of strength, your full levels of flexibility, your full levels of balance maybe, or coordination, or the central nervous system stuff. Like the nervous system takes so much longer to recover than the muscular system. So we know that if we're doing a heavy session of, let's say, leg session, we can have DOMs for 3 or 4 days afterwards, and that's the muscles recovering. What about the nervous system? When you train something like a heavy deadlift, like the nervous system takes, maybe a week to recover from a heavy deadlift session. So everything you do for the rest of that week isn't going to be at your full potential. And I see this with some of my clients where I might program, let's say we're doing 5 sets of chin-ups. I want you to do 5 sets of weighted chin-ups. And in the comments, they'll say, I did 5 sets of chin-ups. And no, then I did 5 more because I just wanted to practice a bit more. And then later in the week, they're like, oh, my muscle-up training really sucked today and I didn't really feel great. Like, yeah, but that's because you did 10 sets of chin-ups earlier in the week. Like, how do you expect to recover from that in those few days before you start doing your muscle-up training or before you start doing something else? So it's easy to get pulled down that idea of more is better. I think the industry sucks at that. We've been telling us that we move more and eat less, and fucking all this idea of like, you've just got to do more. And it's like, well, in reality, actually too much is a negative impact. Overtraining is a real thing, and it can have negatives on our ability to perform. Fatigue masks fitness. Yeah, the sleep thing, sleep is huge. Yeah, I think that I can tell the difference when I have a good night's sleep. If I've had a good night's sleep when I come into my training session, my balance in my handstands is better. My ability to press, my ability to control my body weight or do a new skill, like my focus is there. And if I've not slept, I can just be off by just the smallest of margins, but sleep's a big thing. Yep. Nutrition, like we talk diet, like are you eating enough calories? Like are you actually getting in the fuel that your body needs to be able to do this? Yeah. And even if you are, like what is the nutrients of that? We always talk about calories, and the fitness industry focuses on calories and your macros and counting your protein and counting your carbs. What about your zinc levels? What about your magnesium levels? What about all the nutrients that's in the food that you're eating? Like a calorie is not a calorie. If you eat 100, let's say you eat 100 calories worth of sugar, white table sugar, whatever it is, or you eat 100 calories worth of steak, the difference in nutrients there is huge, but it's still 100 calories. Like, I don't think people grasp that sometimes about the right nutrients. I mean, you were talking about like, you've trained vegan clients in the past who maybe were struggling with the volume and the recovery of their training, and then they introduce, some animal proteins if they're willing to do that, or maybe they introduce a supplement that's got more protein in it that allows them to recover a little bit better. But then they notice less niggles, less,
more collagen. Yeah.
More collagen, so they're less niggles, less wrist pain maybe, less elbow pain maybe, less inflammation maybe, and it changes their ability to train and what they can actually achieve. So outside of the box, besides training, there's all these sort of things we obviously need to consider. Stress is a huge one. I think back in the days when I did have the gym in London, the CrossFit gym, we did CrossFit classes. We also did this Metcon class. We also did like a barbell club class. There were lots of different varieties of classes, but it wasn't uncommon for like maybe one of the female members to come to me and pull me aside to have a chat about, their health and their hormones, maybe their menstruation cycle, missing periods or having heavy periods and stuff like that. And it would come down to stress, and it would come down to they're in the gym 4 or 5 times a week, smashing themselves into the ground. They're working a high-stress job. They're living in a stressful environment, surrounded by artificial light, surrounded by sound, surrounded by pollution. All this stuff's going on, and it's just constantly smashing their body, and it's having a negative impact on their hormones. And the advice is, okay, look, we got to slow shit down. You got to do less. And, let's stop doing the Metcons, let's stop doing the high-intensity stuff. Let's go to a barbell club and just do some pure strength training for a little while, and let's see what happens. And within a short period of time for some of these females, it can have a huge impact in terms of, okay, I'm doing less and I'm feeling better, my menstruation cycle goes back and it's more regular, all this sort of stuff. So I think you've really got to pay attention to that stuff as well, not just training and how can I do more training, how can I do more flexibility, how can I do more strength, how can I add more to unlock my goals. It could be how can I do less. What is the minimum dose response, as they say? What do I need to be able to do to be able to get minimum effective dose to unlock or get what I need to do.
Yeah. So how can I get more out of doing less? Exactly. Get more value for every single rep or every single set. And you don't have to feel like you need to do 10 sets to make any progress. That's usually a good sign of like fatigue masking performance. Like we know from our training, if I had 5 sets of something, if I then tried to do another 5 sets on that thing, I would be wrecked. But then you get some people, I see it a lot in the CrossFit community, where they will just throw extra sets on and they think it's fine. But it's like, hold on a minute, chances are you probably weren't working at the right intensity for the original 5 sets. You see this loads in terms of people that like to do HIIT classes. I've seen this a lot in as well. Well, if you can do so many extra sets, it's because you weren't fatigued enough from the first ones. You weren't fatigued enough from the first ones because you weren't going heavy enough, and you weren't going heavy enough because your body couldn't access it because you're stressed. What you're doing is putting more stress on your body. So if you can, generally speaking, if you can find the right intensity, if you can access the intensity that you need to access for your sets and reps, you don't need to do any extra. You do just enough, and you'll be making gains every week.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think we were chatting about this the other day too. It was like, I've got a few clients, female clients that have come to me that want to get their push-up, their strict push-up on the ground, and that's working on that push-up. And one of the key elements they're missing is that strength. It is like, have I got enough strength to do that push-up? And it's like, okay, we're going to go to the bench press, and we're going to do bench press. And a lot of times when they go to the bench press, it's like they're bench pressing the barbell 20 kilos, and they're very reluctant to add more weight to the bar. And it's like, well, if you can bench press 20 kilos, what about 25 kilos? What about 30 kilos? Like, we've got to actually start to challenge the body and also be willing to fail. Like, I think if you're not failing, then are you really working hard enough? And especially if we're going to be trying to build strength, it's like, yeah, always trying to push that next boundary. And I think it's the same with flexibility. Like, we can do stretches and we can work a stretch. Let's say it's a couch stretch back to wall. If I've got that couch stretch back to wall, like, what's the next level? Like, where do I go to from here to be able to go deeper into that stretch, or to open up this hip even more? We get comfortable with the stretches we know, and we get good at that stretch, but then maybe we don't progress that stretch to take it to the next level. And skill stuff too, like it could be like handstands. I think a common mistake that I maybe made with my handstand journey was, once I had the handstand, I could kick up and hold the freestanding handstand. I was like, well, now I'm going to build to a minute. Okay, now I'm going to build to like 70 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to build to 80 seconds. If I want to do the press handstand, I just need to get better at holding a handstand. And you start chasing this time with the handstand and getting better at holding a fucking straight handstand. But what has that got to do with press handstand? Or what has that got to do with tuck handstand or straddle handstand? We get swept up in, okay, I can successfully hold a handstand. It makes me feel good to hold a handstand, so I keep training the shit that I'm good at, or keep doing the shit that I'm good at, instead of going back to the new skill, going back to a hard skill, and being able to accept the failure is an important part, I think, of the journey. If you're not failing, then you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And if you're not failing, it's like, well, are you avoiding failure because you just get upsets you in that sense? And it's something you've got to look at too. Yeah, I think it's been an interesting conversation, mate. I think it's awesome to sort of look at, gymnastic strength training as a whole, and think about those elements of skill, strength and flexibility. As we finish up, is there anything else you want to add or put on there, mate?
No, just keep doing your reps and keep eating your calories. Preferably steak.
Good to see it. You've just lost all your vegan and vegetarian clients, mate. Dare you. Yeah. People have questions and they want to reach out to you, mate, get in touch. Where's the best place they can find you?
Best place, Instagram at the moment, at Learning to Human. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. You've got a retreat coming up soon?
I do have a retreat coming up in September, actually. Out in the Azores. It's going to be the second Learning to Human retreat. 1 week on the beautiful island, Terceira, and it's going to be full of training. So basically we train every day, we do cold water exposure in the ocean every day, and then you got breakfast, lunch, dinner, which is pretty much meat for every single meal, meat or fish. Some good dairy as well. They've got beautiful cheese in the Azores. Yeah, but it's a nice tight group, so it's like 10 people. It'll be a good experience. There's a few spots left for anyone that did want to inquire. I'm doing it on an application basis, so I'm having to do like a Zoom call with the person first. I just want to make sure people that come in will make a good fit, and also be okay with the type of lifestyle that we'll be having for that week and what we're eating for that week. Yeah. And then Yeah.
Free gains are right there, people, in the meat, the fish, and the good dairy. So you'll definitely be unlocking PBs if you go along to this retreat.
last year, everyone that came hit a new PB somewhere in the week. Yeah. So I think there's something about having a good environment in terms of obviously training with other people. You do sort of push yourself a little bit harder, but also like the conditions were perfect for training. It's like you wake up, you're in sunrise, you can see the sun pretty much the whole day. We're in the sun the whole day. We're eating good local food the whole day. Everything's from the island, nothing's imported, and sleeping good hours, eating at reasonable hours. Yeah, everyone hit a PB, and everyone also felt refreshed. Like no one was over fatigued or burnt out. It's quite interesting what you can do with the right conditions if you can set them up, but also you're taking them away from life stresses, like no work, no kids, no pets.
It's all about the environment, mate.
Yeah.
The free gains are all about the environment.
Yeah, exactly.
If people are keen about that, to learn more about that retreat, where can they find out details there, man?
The website learnishuman.co.uk.
Yeah, awesome.
All there.
Yeah.
And how will people find you?
Yeah, I'm a stretch.rainer on Instagram. I've also got the Sustainable Training Method, TSTM method. Okay, yeah, that's on there. So Instagram is one spot. Big on the YouTube at the moment, so doing a lot of YouTube content. So the Sustainable Training Method on YouTube, if you want to check that out. tstmethod.com is the website, and there's some skill-based programs on there if you want to check that out. Otherwise, it's mainly sort of online coaching one-to-one that I'm working on at the moment.
You're putting out some good content on your YouTube. I'm seeing, you're putting out your training vlogs, and they're quite insightful. I think they give people a good idea of what to expect from training sessions, especially if you're not used to this type of stuff, and being able to watch what you're doing and watch what you're experiencing, being 5-10 years down the line, can be a good experience and a good sort of revelation for some newbies, definitely.
Yeah, cheers, man. It's something new I've been working on, just chucking out a few training vlogs, but also some educational stuff there as well, and then just a whole exercise library. So if you're looking for some progressions and exercise stuff, there's like a couple of thousand videos there, so that should take up a few weekends of browsing if you want to go through and watch those. I need to get my watch hours up, so the more you watch, the better for me. So if you can do that, that'd be great. Awesome. Been a great chat, mate. Been awesome to catch up, and I look forward to next month to wherever you are and hearing more about your travels and stuff, and just keeping up with the podcast. But thanks for listening, guys. Hope you got something out of this episode, and until next time, happy training.
See you guys.